It really does feel like every time you blink, something new and huge pops up, especially in the world of AI.
Oh, absolutely, and keeping up with it all. Well, that's a challenge in itself.
It is, and that's why we're here today to break down one of the latest developments that has everyone buzzing, GenSpark's super agent.
Right, and we've all seen those AI chatbots popping up everywhere, some more helpful than others.
Definitely.
But super agent seems to be aiming for something a lot bigger, a general AI agent.
Okay, so what does that actually mean? What's a general AI agent?
Well, imagine an autonomous system, right? One that can handle real-world tasks, not just in one specific area, but across a whole bunch of different domains.
Oh, wow. Okay, so way beyond just, answering simple questions or generating text, like actually doing things in the real world.
Exactly, that's the idea. And some people might remember Menace. They've been part of this general AI agent conversation for a while, but super agent, well, they seem to be making a pretty bold statement, saying, hey, we're taking this to the next level.
So are they like competitors? Is this a head-to-head race?
It's starting to feel that way. The AI landscape is getting pretty competitive these days. So today, we really want to take a deep dive into super agent, figure out what it is, how it actually works, what sets it apart from everything else out there, and most importantly, why this matters to you, even if you're not someone who's, constantly thinking about AI or using it every day.
Because even if you're not thinking about it, it's probably going to start impacting your life in ways you might not even realize.
Exactly. And to do that deep dive, we've got some really interesting material to work with. There's this great article from VentureBeat, GenSpark Super Agent ups the ante in the general AI agent race. Then we have a transcript from GenSpark's own YouTube channel. They have a video titled Meet GenSpark Super Agent, a fast and reliable general AI agent, which we'll be digging into.
So we're getting it straight from the source.
We are. We've also got another YouTube transcript. This one is from the AI Revolution channel, and they have a pretty catchy title. New Super Agent AI from China shocks the world. Better than Menace. And then finally, we'll be taking a look at what people are saying on the GenSpark subreddit. Lots of discussion happening there.
Okay, so let's jump right in. First things first, what exactly is this super agent?
Well, it's the brainchild of GenSpark, a startup based in Palo Alto. And they're calling it, as we said, a fast-moving autonomous system, really emphasizing that speed and independence. And as we talked about earlier, the big idea is that this ability to handle real-world tasks across a whole bunch of different areas. And the examples they've shown, well, they're pretty impressive, to say the least.
I mean, one that really caught my eye was their demo of making actual phone calls to restaurants.
Yeah.
And not just, those robotic automated menus.
Right.
This was with a synthetic voice that sounded incredibly realistic, like a real person booking a table.
It's pretty mind-blowing when you hear it, and all of this is coming from GenSpark, which was founded by Eric Jing, who actually has an interesting background. He used to be an executive at BYU, so he's coming from a different world than you might expect.
That's interesting. So how is GenSpark saying that they've managed to make super agent super? What's the secret sauce?
Well, they're pointing to three main things, kind of their recipe for success. First, they're using not just one, but 9 different large language models, all working together in concert. Second, they have this incredible set of over 80 specialized toolkits that the agent can use. And third, they've incorporated over 10 proprietary data sets into their training process.
Okay, so a lot of moving parts.
A lot of moving parts. And what they claim is that this allows Super Agent to go way beyond just basic chat. It can manage complex workflows. It's not just providing information, it's taking action, getting things done.
Okay, so it's less about answering your questions and more about actually executing tasks, achieving a specific outcome.
Exactly, and that outcome can take many forms. And they're really pushing the idea that this is super steerable. You, as the user, can really guide the agent and make sure it's doing what you need it to do. And they're also saying it's designed to be very user-friendly, even for people who aren't, AI experts.
So are they targeting specific types of users then?
It seems like they're going after a pretty wide range of professionals. We're talking about marketers, teachers, recruiters, designers, analysts, you name it. And the idea is that you don't need a ton of technical know-how to get started. It's designed to be pretty intuitive.
Well, that's really interesting because that could really open up the possibilities for using AI in everyday work.
That's their goal. And to really see what Super Agent can do, it's worth looking at some of the demos they've put out. And one that they really showcased was this whole scenario of planning a 5-day trip to San Diego.
Okay, so what did that involve?
Well, it wasn't just about, pulling up a list of tourist attractions. Super Agent went deep. It accessed travel data, researched public transportation options for getting around the city, even calculated walking distances between different points of interest.
Wow, so it's like having a super efficient travel agent at your fingertips.
That's a great way to put it. And it didn't stop there. It mapped out transit routes, figured out the best way to get from point A to point B, and then, get this, it actually booked restaurants, taking into account things like dietary restrictions.
So like if you had a shellfish allergy or were vegetarian.
Exactly, it would factor those things in. And it even considered seating preferences, like if you wanted a window table or something.
Great, so it's really thinking about all those little details that can make a trip so much smoother.
It is, and apparently it managed to do all of this in just a few minutes. Think about how long it would take you to manually research and book all of that. It's really a huge time saver.
I can only imagine, and that's just one example. They had a bunch of other demos too, right?
They did. And another one that really caught my attention was how it could create an entire cooking video reel. Those step-by-step recipe videos you see online. They had it make one for a dish called Kalanzi and pistachio crusted codfish.
Okay, so did it actually film the video?
Well, not exactly. It generated the recipe steps, created the visual scenes for each step, and even produced the audio narration that would go along with it.
So basically all the core elements of a professional looking cooking video, all put together by an AI.
Pretty much. And then, get this, they even had it write and produce a short animated episode in the style of South Park.
You're kidding. So like a full-on cartoon.
Yeah, a full-on cartoon, complete with the humor and the style of South Park. The episode was a parody of a fictional political scandal they called Signalgate, which is kind of a funny play on words, all right?
Very clever.
Yeah.
But I mean, the fact that it could handle the creative writing aspect of it, come up with a story, the jokes, and then translate that into animation.
It's pretty wild. And the animation style was spot on too, so clearly this AI has some serious creative chops.
It does. And then of course there was that phone call demo that we talked about earlier, the one where it actually called a restaurant to make a reservation.
Right, and it wasn't just about making the call, it was about all those little details it handled. It mentioned a shellfish allergy, requested a vegetarian option, and even asked for a window table, all in a very natural sounding way. it really does make you think about how AI might change the way we interact with businesses and services in the future. No more frustrating automated menus or being put on hold forever.
It's like having a personal assistant that can handle all those little tasks for you.
Exactly, that's the promise of it. And GenSpark was even talking about, imagine if you needed to make 100 phone calls, a really tedious task.
Oh my gosh, I can't even imagine.
Like, let's say you're trying to track down a hard-to-find piece of tech, something like an NVIDIA 5090 chip. Imagine having Super Agent make those calls for you, screen the responses, and only connect you when it finds what you're looking for. It could save so much time and effort.
I mean, that's just one scenario. But you can imagine the possibilities are kind of endless, right? Depending on the task, this could be incredibly useful.
It could be. And those are just some of the main demos they've highlighted. But they've actually hinted at a whole bunch of other potential applications for Super Agent. Everything from identifying influencers for marketing campaigns to visualizing complex math formulas in 3D.
So like making it easier for students to understand.
Exactly. Or helping teachers create more engaging lesson plans. They've also talked about using it for comparing LinkedIn profiles for recruiting, even turning long YouTube interviews into concise slide presentations.
I mean, that's a game changer for anyone who's ever had to sit through an hour-long interview and try to take notes.
Or for researchers who need to quickly extract the key points from a lengthy video. And the cool thing is, if you want to see some of these demos for yourself, you can head over to the GenSpark subreddit. They've actually posted links to a bunch of them there.
Okay, so it's not just hype. There's actual footage of this thing working.
Exactly. Now, all of that makes you wonder, how is Super Agent actually doing all of this? Coordinating all of these different capabilities has to be a pretty massive technical challenge.
It does. We're not talking about simple one-step commands here. This involves coordinating a lot of different tools and processes, managing complex workflows, and somehow making sure everything runs smoothly.
Yeah, and one of the things that GenSpark seems to have really tackled is this issue of tool orchestration at scale. That's a big deal in the AI world. A lot of AI agents struggle when they need to manage more than just a few external APIs or tools, you know? They get overwhelmed.
So, they can handle one or two things, but when you start adding more complexity,
they start to break down. But Super Agent, with its claim of having access to over 80 specialized toolkits, it suggests they've found a way to make this kind of large-scale orchestration work. And the VentureBeat article actually dug into some of the possible technical approaches they might be using. They mentioned model routing and retrieval-based selection. Have you heard much about those?
I haven't really. What do those terms mean?
So model routing probably refers to how Super Agent figures out which of its 9 different LLMs is the best fit for a specific part of a task. You know, like it might use one LLM for understanding natural language, another one for generating creative text, and yet another one for analyzing data. It's about dynamically assigning the right specialist to the right job.
Okay, so it's like a team of experts, each with their own specialty.
Exactly. And then retrieval-based selection likely describes how the agent figures out which of its many tools to use at each stage. It's probably assessing what's happening, what needs to be done next, and then picking the tool from its arsenal that's best suited for the job.
So it's not just about having a lot of tools, it's about knowing when and how to use each one effectively.
Right, and the article also mentions something called the Model Context Protocol, or MCP. Now that's a bit more technical, but it's basically like giving Super Agent a really good short-term memory.
What do you mean?
So imagine you're planning that San Diego trip, and you tell Super Agent, hey, I'm allergic to shellfish and I prefer vegetarian options. With MCP, the agent can remember those preferences throughout the entire planning process. It doesn't need you to repeat them every time it books a restaurant or suggests a meal. It also helps the agent keep track of which tools it's already used, what information it's already gathered, so it doesn't waste time repeating steps.
So it makes the whole process more efficient and less repetitive.
Exactly, and it's this combination of MCP and GenSpark's proprietary datasets that might be why their agent seems so steerable, you know? It can handle those nuanced requests, those little details that make a big difference in the outcome.
And the fact that they're claiming near instant results for some of these really complex tasks, that's pretty impressive. It suggests that their system is incredibly efficient under the hood.
It does. And another thing that caught my eye was their emphasis on visualizing the thought process of the AI. You can actually see how it's reasoning through each step, which tools it's using, and the logic behind its choices. That kind of transparency is pretty rare in the AI world, and it could be a big deal for building trust, especially in business settings where people need to understand how decisions are being made.
It's like being able to peek inside the AI's brain and see how it's working.
Exactly. And speaking of other AI agents out there, we have to talk about Manus. They've been getting a lot of attention recently, and Super Agent seems to be positioning itself as, well, superior. So what were Manus's big claims to fame? What were they able to do?
Yeah, I mean, Manus definitely made a splash when they came out. What was it that got everyone so excited?
Well, Manus was developed by a company called Monica, based in China. And their main focus was on creating an AI that could operate different tools. You know, things like web browsers, code editors, spreadsheet software, but do it autonomously in the cloud. So think about tasks that involve multiple steps, different tools, and they could do all of this without constant human intervention.
So like a really advanced form of automation.
Exactly. It's like having an AI assistant that can manage those complex multi-step workflows for you all in the background.
Okay, so what was their technical approach? What made Manus unique?
Well, one of the things they emphasized was their use of open source components, including a lot of web tools and LLMs like Claude from Anthropic. Now, what was surprising was that even though they weren't using a completely proprietary model stack, they actually outperformed OpenAI on the GAIA benchmark.
I've heard of that benchmark. What is it exactly?
GAIA is a synthetic test, basically a simulation, designed to see how well AI agents can automate real-world tasks. So it's a way to compare different AI systems and see which ones are the most capable.
So Manus beating OpenAI on that benchmark, that's a pretty big deal, right?
It was, definitely. And now GenSpark is claiming that they've surpassed Manus on the same benchmark. They're reporting a score of 87.8% compared to Manus's 86%.
It's like a one-upmanship kind of thing.
It's starting to feel that way, like, hey, we can do even better. But it's not just about the score itself. What really matters is, how do these differences translate into actual capabilities, things that you, the listener, might care about?
Right, like what can Super Agent actually do that Manus can't?
Well, the most obvious difference that they've highlighted is Super Agent's built-in ability to make phone calls. That's something Manus doesn't currently offer.
Right, we talked about that earlier.
Right.
And that's a big deal because it opens up a whole new world of possibilities for how AI can interact with the real world, beyond just manipulating data in the cloud.
Exactly. And that voice interaction, that ability to have a natural sounding conversation, it really does bridge the gap between the digital world and the physical world in a way that we haven't seen before.
So it's not just about working behind the scenes anymore. It's about AI actually engaging with the world in a more human-like way.
Precisely. And there was another interesting point in the AI Revolution video. They mentioned that Manus is actually planning to open source parts of its system later this year.
Oh, interesting. So are they trying to encourage more collaboration and development?
That seems to be the idea, make the technology more accessible, allow other people to build on it and contribute. But in terms of their overall focus, it does seem like there's a bit of a difference between GenSpark and Manus.
How so?
Well, GenSpark seems to be leaning more towards those everyday consumer and professional scenarios, the things we've been talking about, booking restaurants, creating social media content, making videos. Manus, on the other hand, appears to be more focused on tackling larger, more technical tasks.
Like what kinds of tasks?
Things like resume screening, stock analysis, those kinds of things. So it'll be really interesting to see which approach ends up being more successful in the long run, which one actually solves real-world problems that people care about.
And whether those two approaches will converge or diverge even further as time goes on.
Exactly. Now, while all this is happening, we also have to consider the big players, right? Microsoft, OpenAI, Amazon, the big names in AI. What are they doing in this space of general purpose agents?
Yeah, are they just sitting back and watching these startups make all the moves?
Well, what's interesting is that they seem to be taking a much more cautious approach than these smaller, more agile companies. Their current offerings, things like Microsoft's Copilot Studio, OpenAI's Agent SDK, Amazon's Nova Act, they tend to be more focused on specific use cases, less about creating a single, all-encompassing general agent and more about providing building blocks for specialized agents that work within their own ecosystems.
So it's like they're saying, here are the tools, but you figure out how to use them.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And there are probably a few reasons for this. One is risk aversion. These big companies have a lot more to lose if their AI makes a big mistake,
Right? Like, imagine if Google released a general AI agent that accidentally booked the wrong flight for thousands of people or gave incorrect financial advice.
Exactly, it could be a PR nightmare. So they're probably being extra careful, especially with something as powerful as a general purpose AI agent.
And the VentureBeat article also mentioned something about being tied to their own model ecosystem.
Right, because companies like Google, Microsoft, Amazon, they've invested a lot in developing their own large language models, and that can make them a bit reluctant to, mix and match with models from other providers, which, as we discussed, seems to be a key part of GenSpark's strategy with their concert of 9 LLMs.
So it's like they're a bit stuck in their own lanes, whereas these startups can be more flexible and experimental.
It's kind of like that, yeah. They have more freedom to try new things, integrate different technologies, and that might be giving them an edge in this fast-moving field of AI. So, while we might not see a Google agent or a Microsoft agent with the same kind of broad autonomous capabilities as Super Agent anytime soon, the underlying technology that they're developing, the advancements they're making, those are still incredibly important. It's all feeding into the overall progress of AI.
Absolutely. And that brings up a really important question, especially for our listeners who are, thinking about the practical implications of all this. Why should businesses and individuals even care about these developments? The demos we've seen from GenSpark, they seem very consumer focused, right? Planning trips, creating social media content, making funny videos. What's the relevance in a professional context?
That's the key, Corden, isn't it? Most companies aren't going to be using an AI to book dinner reservations anytime soon, but what they should be paying attention to is the underlying technology, the ability to handle those complex multi-step processes with a degree of autonomy. That's where the real potential lies.
So how could this actually be applied in a business setting?
Well, imagine using an AI agent to automate specific workflows within a company. You could have it gather and format compliance data from all sorts of different systems, manage the onboarding process for new customers or employees, which can be incredibly tedious, even create marketing content across different formats, text, images, video.
So instead of having a person do all of that manually, you have an AI handle.
Exactly. And the more autonomous these agents become, the more seamlessly they can integrate things like voice, memory, external tools, the more potential they have to really disrupt the way things are done currently. A lot of companies are still relying on legacy software, robotic process automation, things like that.
And those can be pretty clunky and inflexible, right?
They can be, and these AI agents, especially the ones that are being developed now, they could offer a more elegant and efficient solution. They could handle those tasks that are currently slipping through the cracks, the things that are too complex for traditional automation, but too time-consuming for humans to do effectively.
So it's not about replacing humans altogether. It's about augmenting their capabilities, freeing them up to focus on the things that require human ingenuity and creativity.
Exactly. And GenSpark is really emphasizing that ease of use, the idea that professionals from all sorts of different backgrounds, even if they don't have a lot of technical expertise, can still utilize Super Agent effectively. That's a big part of their strategy.
And that makes sense because the lower the barrier to entry, the faster these tools will be adopted and the faster we'll see the real world impact.
Absolutely. Oh, and before I forget, there are a couple of other interesting tidbits from that GenSpark High subreddit. Apparently, GenSpark is actually discontinuing their AI search tool, GenSpark Search, pretty soon.
Oh, really? Any reason why?
It wasn't entirely clear from the post, but it seems like they might be shifting their focus to other products and services.
Okay, so maybe Super Agent's taking priority.
Could be. On a more positive note, they also announced the release of a GenSpark iOS app. So it looks like they're making their technology more accessible on mobile devices.
That makes sense given how much we rely on our phones and tablets these days. And if I remember correctly, GenSpark has already raised a pretty significant amount of funding, right?
They have. The VentureBeat article mentioned at least $160 million, which is a pretty clear indication that investors are seeing a lot of potential in their vision.
That's a serious vote of confidence. And one thing that strikes me as really smart on GenSpark's part is how accessible they've made Super Agent. You can just try it out in your browser, no complicated setup, no need to provide a bunch of personal information up front.
Right, which is a pretty stark contrast to Manus, which reportedly had wait lists and a more involved onboarding process.
So they're really lowering the barrier to entry, making it as easy as possible for people to experience the technology firsthand and see what it can do.
It's a smart move, because once people get their hands on it, they can start to imagine the possibilities, and that's when the real innovation starts to happen.
So to kind of wrap things up, it's pretty clear that the world of general AI agents is moving incredibly fast. And GenSpark Super Agent is definitely a major development. I mean, the combination of multimodal capabilities, that user-friendly approach, it's a pretty compelling package.
It is. For me, the key takeaways are the innovative way they've combined multiple large language models, that comprehensive toolkit they've put together, and the proprietary data they're using. And then, of course, there's that ability to make phone calls, which really sets it apart from what we've seen before. All of this working together to handle those complex, real-world tasks, that's a game changer.
Absolutely. And while those initial demos might seem more geared toward consumer applications, I think the implications for the business world are huge. This technology has the potential to fundamentally change how work gets done, how we automate tasks, and even how we interact with technology on a daily basis.
It does, and it raises some really big questions, like as these AI agents become more capable, more integrated into our lives, what kind of shifts are we going to see in how we work, how we create, how we communicate? What new opportunities are going to open up? What new challenges are we going to face? And for you, the listener, I think the key question is, how is this going to impact your specific field, your industry, your daily life? It's worth taking some time to really think about that, because this is just the beginning. We're on the cusp of a pretty major transformation.
Food for thought, for sure.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll be back soon with more insights into the world of AI and how it's shaping our future.
Looking forward to it. See you next time.